The prophet Jeremiah had a very difficult ministry. He had to tell the people and the faith that he loved. The direction they were headed was not good. And they had to change a lot of the things that they were doing, or a lot of destruction was going to come their way. They couldn't continue to live the way they were living. And he caught a lot of grief for that. A lot of the leadership turned on him and really disrespected everything that he had to say, and then, of course, it took place. In the place that he loved, the people he loved were destroyed by the Babylonians, who came and tore down the temples and killed men, women, and children, and took what was left over into Babylon for captivity. And everything that he had said had come true. And he is left there now in Jerusalem with just a few remaining survivors and all of the dead to take care of. And it was a horrible situation for him to be in. The people he loved turned their back on him, and then they were slain, and then they were taken in prison. The temple and the church that he loved was completely destroyed. And numerous times he asked God, why am I in this position? Why do I have to be the one who does this? Why do I have to give this information to all the people? Can't you find somebody else to do this? It's not easy to be the voice of God to stubborn people. But that's just part of the responsibility given, especially to Jeremiah. But what's remarkable about Jeremiah is he writes this letter, this book that we have in there. It's called Lamentations. It doesn't sound like a top reading list, does it? It's not something you pull off the book and say, oh, let's read about mourning and crying and weeping. But he writes Lamentations. And then that he shares his heart and his soul. And then, in the midst of all of that, he always seems to come back to the important parts about God. In spite of all the questioning, in spite of all the doubting, in spite of all the anger, all the voices of bitterness that are given up to God, he always seems to come back to the reality of who God truly is. And he says this section in chapter 3. In spite of all that, the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every single morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul that seeks him. And it is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for one to bear the yoke in youth, to sit alone in silence. And when the Lord has imposed it, to put one's mouth to the dust and to give one's cheek to the smiter and be filled with insults. This month of Advent, we are reminding ourselves that Christmas is about sharing, just like the little video that you saw. Christmas is about sharing, but sharing isn't just for Christmas. And sharing isn't just for those in our little inner circle of people. Sometimes we forget that. You know, last week we talked a little bit about living the good life and the fact that all of us have our own version of the good life. I have my version of what the good life looks like. I shared with you that last week. If you weren't here, go on our website and listen to the sermon and get more information on our sermon series that we're dealing with on Christmases for sharing, the good life versus the better life. But just for the record, I want us to understand that Jesus never condemned the good life. We need to make that, be very upfront about that. He never condemned the good life. He just expects his followers to set a higher standard for their lives by living a better life. And there's a difference between the good life and the better life. And the good life just benefits just me. It benefits me and my closest, those folks who are closest to me, my inner circle of people. And it's really easy to get locked in to that particular group of people because we love those groups of people. We love our family, we love our kids, our grandkids, those who are close to us. And so the good life that we live is usually shared just with those certain people, and it only benefits me and those who I share it with. The better life, on the other hand, benefits those who are in need. It is the greater family that God calls us to live in. But not only does it benefit other people like we saw in this movie, but it also benefits ourselves. And so everybody tends to win in this whole situation. But also the good life only offers a temporary feeling of happiness and pleasure. It's almost like crack in a way. You remember those days when you smoked crack, right? There's an instant high, an instant gratification, and then it's gone. And you want to get that back so much. And the only way you can get it back is to take another hit, and then another hit, and then another hit. But it always seems to go away. And that's how happiness is, and that's how pleasure is. It's very addictive. And that's what the good life has to offer us, is one satisfying thing for the briefest moment after another. But the better life leads us to a permanent state of fulfillment. As soon our soul is so full and so satisfied because we have participated in making life better for those outside of our circle of people. We have participated with God to those that Jesus refers to as the least of these. That's the better life. So this month we're talking about how to raise our standard for living, to engage in the better life that Jesus has been trying for 2,000 years to get us to enter into. And so this morning, I want us to consider, if we will, one of the key ingredients to living a better life. And that key ingredient is what is known as, or talked about as, actively waiting. Sounds like an oxymoron, doesn't it? How do you actively wait? Ever thought about that? Now, for those of us who love the good life, actively waiting is kind of a fancy word for being lazy, isn't it? Because waiting is not productive. Waiting is wasting time. Actively waiting, what's that? Playing video games? Playing on our phones? Messing around? Goofing off? While something else of interest comes along that we can participate in? Actively waiting sounds like it is a waste of time, but in the better life, actively waiting is where we slow down life and we consider God's perspective for our own lives. And without knowing how to actively wait, then God will always seem to us to be rather distant and uncaring and cold and calloused and not interested in our life. There are 4 benefits that we receive when we learn how to actively wait. The first one is this. When we actively wait, we find joy in the ordinary things of life. When we're actively wait and slow down, we begin to find out what our blessings are. We can count them without question. When we actively wait, we are constantly understanding who we are and where we are in our relationship with God and where we're not in our relationship with God, and learn how to accept the forgiveness that is offered to God. And then when we actively wait, we're able to finish the race which we have started with our faith journey. I'm going to touch on just the first 2 of those, if we will. The first one is finding joy in the ordinary. this is a part of our actively waiting, is that we find joy in the ordinary. Now, yesterday I went to the TCU football game. TCU is a school. It's in West Fort Worth. I don't know, y'all awake? You're with us? And so I went with my baby girl, Kaylin, and her boyfriend. So we sat in the bleachers, and right in front of us were 4 8-year-old girls. How interested do you think 8-year-old girls are in a TCU football game? Anybody want to take a guess? Okay. They were more interested in the nacho cheese than they were anything else that took place. And so they were doing what 8-year-old girls do. They stand up on the bleachers, they're dancing. I've got it on video. I was really having a good time with them. And they were not paying attention to the game at all. And then they would dance, and then they would do all the different types of things that girls do. Then they messing around, and they're doing the hand gestures and doing all these things. And it was, it could potentially make me really upset because they're doing it right here. And so the mothers were listening and paying attention, and the mothers turned around to me and said, are they bothering you? And I said, no. They're doing what 8-year-old girls do, right? That's what they're supposed to do. So I decided not to get mad about it or raise a stink about it. So what I decided to do instead was just to find joy in just this ordinary moment, right? I could have been a real jerk about it, and I probably would have in the younger days. But I decided not to do that. They weren't interested in the game, and so I tried to help them get engaged in the game, right? And at TCU football games, there's certain things you have to learn. So I would yell at them, it's time to frog up, which means they stood up on the bleachers and they put their frog sign up and they started to chant. They know what's going on, but they did it anyway. Then I had to teach them what we do during kickoffs, right? So frog up again. When they kick the ball, you throw your hand down and say, TCU frogs. So they participate in that. And then they had to participate and teach them how to do third downs. Y'all know how to do third downs, TCU language? Yeah? You stand up and you do your 3. This is 3 for third down, right? And you just go, ah. This is very intelligent stuff that we're dealing with now, right? And so I had all these 4 girls up there screaming and hollering at the top of their lungs, which is pretty high up there, and doing all of these gestures with us the whole entire time. Now, let me ask you this. Who benefited from this little thing? Anybody? Okay, I enjoyed it. The game went by faster than you think. It was a 4-hour game. Who else benefited from it? The girls did. That's probably the first time they really got into a football game at certain junctures. We're going to try it with Claudia next week, okay? Who else benefited from that? The mothers did. There were 3 mothers there, and those were all their daughters, and so they're always worrying what they were doing because they're paying attention to the game and having a good time, and so all this is going on. Who else benefited from it? There were people all around just really interested in what those girls were doing. So if it was just me trying to say, I'm here to watch my game, and I don't want you stinking girls to mess up my experience, just sit down and be quiet or go somewhere else and take these kids out of here because they have no business being in here because they're too young to enjoy a football game, who benefits from that? I do. You see the difference between the good life and a better life? It's not about me. And that's what the good life represents. There's nothing wrong with the good life except when it starts to interfere with the life that Christ is trying us to lead. Raise your standards, Danny. It's not about you just enjoying a football game. Make life better around you by how you participate in what you're doing with life. Enjoy it. Find joy in the ordinary so that everyone around you benefits. That's a better life that we're called to lead. We're not here to be grumpy old men. Get our way. Find joy in the ordinary. The second one is to count your blessings. That's a tough one too. Last Sunday, church was over a little before noon, I think. So I go outside. My phone's ringing when I'm trying to talk to people, and it's Sam. And Sam left 8 o'clock in the morning, Sunday morning, to head back to Nebraska, 15-hour drive. I didn't answer the phone, so he called my daughter. My daughter came over and ended up talking to him. His truck broke down in Purcell, Oklahoma. You know where that is? Me neither. I do now. It's a little bitty town just in front of Norman, which is just in front of Oklahoma City. In other words, it's noon. Sam is 3 hours into a 15-hour drive to get back to college with 3 of his friends. He has to report as a football team at 6 a.m. in the morning for study hall. And you know how forgiving coaches are, right? We know how that works. Then he has classes. So he is kind of panicking. My truck is overheating. Something's wrong with it. I just said, shut it down. And so we made a plan for him to do. And then I get in the car at 1 o'clock, and I drive up with another vehicle to Purcell, thank you. Sure they have some great pawn shops there. Purcell, Oklahoma. And I get there, find him on the side of the road, 5 o'clock, before the tow truck even got there. Truck breaks down at 11:30. I show up at 5 o'clock. Okay? So how do you think Sam would have been feeling if I hadn't had a conversation before that time? That's a long time to wait, isn't it? That's a long time for a lot of panic to set in. That's a long time for a lot of anger to set in. You ever been there? Your best made plans go south, and what do? We panic, we get angry, we get frustrated, we think something's wrong. And so, as I was driving to Oklahoma, I called Sam. I said, we got a plan. Now, I just want you to realize how lucky you are. Really. You're in a truck, and a cold front's coming in. You're warm. You're with your 3 best buddies. What would happen if you were by yourself? You have a cell phone. You can contact anybody you want to contact that you need to contact. You have people that you know how to call. Think about how lucky and fortunate you are, how blessed you are to be even in the situation that you find yourself in. There's roadside service, and they will be there. How fortunate is that? And if things get bad, you have 911. I had to tell them the number for that one. But we started talking about how fortunate he was to be in a position where he was. I mean, how many times have we gotten there in our life where we have our schedule set, we have our minds made up, we know a direction we're going to go, we know how we're going to get there, when we're going to get there, we got everything laid out, either for a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, whatever, and then what happens? Life hits us, doesn't it? And what happens to our best laid plans? They go south, don't they? And instead of complaining and whining about things that go wrong, what do we try to do? Find the ordinary blessings that are around us and the people that we know, and thank God that we have them to hold on to. Thank God that we have the world in which we live in. how fortunate we are to have all the blessings that make up our life. The fact is, things always go wrong in our life. Happens every single day. It'll happen to you this week, I promise. And it's not because God's picking on you for not getting your way. It's not because God is testing your faith to see if you're a strong Christian. It's because this is life. The good and the bad take place every single day. So we had better stop and enjoy the very simple pleasures of ordinary life so life can be better for all. And we better be sure to thank God for the little tiny things that make up our life because we see them every single day. They are there. That's actively waiting. But the best part about actively waiting is not waiting until we're kind of forced to actively wait. Does that make sense? Don't intentionally not put gas in your vehicle and just drive off in the middle of Oklahoma and do active waiting. Okay? Active waiting is something we need to learn how to do every single day. Every day. We need to force that practice upon ourselves until, just like what Sam has had to learn, and just like we'd see at the TCU football game, it becomes very natural just for us to be able to enjoy the ordinary things in life and to count the blessings of everything that God has placed before us. You know, Max Lucado has a phrase that he coined. It's called eternal instant. Ever heard of that? That's pretty cool. It kind of stuck with me. Eternal instant. It's that moment. It's that moment that we realize that the greatest treasures in our life are already surrounding us. Isn't that cool? We don't have to go buy them. We don't have to go get nothing. That the greatest treasures are already surrounding us. It's our home. It's our family. It's our friends. It's a heart that God created us to be, a heart that gives and not takes and keeps. It's the peace of mind that we've already been receiving. It's our unique gifts that we have to share. It's those eternal instants where we begin to see and we begin to understand the difference between living the good life, which is fun for me and my own, and living a better life where everybody benefits. Now, we're going to address the last two benefits of actively waiting next time. But until then, you have homework, homework, homework. Until we meet again, which is probably a couple of weeks. For 2 weeks, you have homework. So this is your homework, and I want you to write it down, and I want you to fulfill it, and I want you to try to live it out this entire season of Advent. Don't be a grumpy person. Try this homework.